Hey, it's Kat with Living Solo, Living Well, and this is actually a video about the loss of friends when you are a solo person or a single person. So I've experienced some loss of friends when I've changed jobs, even when I didn't change jobs. I had a really good friend that we always did stuff together. We always talked to each other. And I had tried to call her one day, just like I would normally do. And I noticed that she never returned my call, or I called a couple times. She never returned my calls. And whereas in the past, when we were actually friends, we would reciprocate. She would answer or she'd call me back or vice versa. And I kind of noticed that she had never called me. After a certain point, I would be the one to call her and she wouldn't answer. So much time went by that I thought she's purposely not wanting to answer or not wanting to communicate with me. And that's okay, but I think there would have been a better way to go about it. But to lose friends at this age when we're living solo, she was a solo person as well. She had been single for a long time. She was dating somebody, but I don't know what happened that caused whatever to where we didn't speak anymore. She never returned my calls or my text messages. So I thought that was kind of strange because we'd been communicating and we'd been going to dinner together, and I would go to her house, she'd come over to my house, we'd, respectively fix dinner, and that ended. So I don't know why. I didn't have any closure on it. But as time has gone by, I had to let it go. I had to let go of the fact that we were friends. I had a great friend. We would do things together, and then we'd go out to eat. We'd do, come over to each other's houses, and that ended abruptly. It seems like that was a really hard thing for me to accept at that time. But as time has gone by, I've learned to accept it, and I've realized that it may not be me, it may be her. It may be the person who ends contact with you. They might be going through something. It might be that it reflects on them rather than me or the person they've ignored. So I've learned to live with that, and I don't struggle with it anymore. Every now and then I think about her, but I don't wish that we were friends anymore. It's not like the thoughts I had initially where, gosh, I wish I knew what was going on because I really miss her. I've learned that that's just how it is. Some people, that's what they do, and you just have to go on, you move on. So one of the other things that I've experienced personally is the loss of friends that I made when I was working. So when I was let go from a position, as it was a wrongful termination while I was on light duty for some injuries I sustained from a fall. And I was great friends with people who I worked with. So they, a lot of them were nurses. I'm a nurse, and a lot of them were CNAs as well. Just people in general that I worked with, housekeepers, management. And once I was fired or wrongfully terminated, then those friends disappeared, and we never stayed in touch. The people that you thought were your friends weren't. So these people that I spent day in and day out with, I don't know, I call it surface level friends, kind of like when you talk to somebody you don't know and you talk about the weather, you talk about, gosh, the sun's out today, it looks great. To me, that's surface talk. And so these friends that don't follow through, like once you're out of their life or they don't see you anymore, you were not good friends. You were like a surface friend. You were like somebody to be friends with while you're at work. But after that, no more. You don't hear from these people anymore. And that was really difficult because I spent so much time at work and bonding with these people. I guess I wear my feelings on my sleeve, or I used to, maybe not so much now, but I I missed that when I first left. I wanted to talk to these people and let them know what happened. There was a wrongful termination, and a year later it was settled. So that's over with now. But the friends are gone. You know, there is one friend, she's an older nurse, older than I am. She was still working just PRN, and we have remained friends. We've contacted each other and communicated, but we would talk to each other during, she'd come in at 3 o'clock. My shift would end at 7. She would be 3 to 11. So between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, she would have to get started, do her med pass. I would be finishing up my med pass, and we would sit in the break room if we had a chance, a few minutes, and we would vent to each other. You know, you've got that one person that you feel like you can trust and you can vent, and they know what you're going through because they're going through the same thing. We were both frustrated with management and with how management treated the employees who didn't pull their full weight. They would pick on or fire, or it's like you were the good one. You did the good job. You did the things you were supposed to do. You made sure all your tasks, all your nursing assessments, all of your charting was done before you left. The ones that did not do that, you know, the management would complain and say, this has to be done by a certain time. We must do this. You guys have to do this. So those of us that had, I guess, integrity did those things, those required tasks. But the others that were not pulling their whole weight or their own weight, they were the ones that would slack and leave things for the next nurse coming on, which would be me or someone else. They would leave those tasks for them. So one of the things that this friend and I would talk about was just how ridiculous things were, and how, I guess you could say, unfair that the people who were doing a good job and follow the rules. I'm a rule follower. I follow the rules. I do what I'm supposed to do when I'm at work. I want to get my job done, and then I want to go home. So for those of us who did follow the rules, we sometimes got, you know, she was a PRN nurse there, kind of part-time to PRN, and they started changing her schedule for whatever reason and not scheduling her. She never knew why, but that's just what happened. We would talk about there were some other employees who did not do what they were supposed to do, and we would have to be on them as the nurse. CNAs, for example, we would have to be on them about, you've got to get this done and you've got to get this done before you leave, but they wouldn't do it. I mean, it's almost like we were trying to do what we were supposed to do and make our charges, the ones under us, do what they were supposed to do. That was our responsibility to follow through and make sure they did those, but they didn't. And you know, so she and I would talk about how frustrated we were at the system. So when I was fired wrongfully, we continued to stay in touch. We talked about, you know, she does things with horses, so we talked about horses, but she was kind of like the only person when I was fired, that I continued to stay in touch with, or who continued to stay in touch with me. So I had a really hard time with that, because when I bond with someone, it takes a lot, first of all, because I'm more of an introvert. But when I bond with someone and I share things about my life and I work with them and we're saving patients, you know, helping patients and taking care of patients, you develop a certain kind of bond. And then all of a sudden you're out of the picture and you don't know what to do with yourself. So at being a solo person, living solo and trying to live well requires me, in my mind, means I have to let that go, because that's not healthy for me. Rather than ruminate on what happened and these friends that I thought were friends, they were so-called friends, the fact that they are now out of my life, I need to let that go, because that's doing me no favors when I'm trying to live well. And, you know, there were times I would think, kind of like, poor me, or why did they do that to me? Why did they just dismiss me and not communicate anymore when we were very close? A lot of us were very close. We were just work friends. So when you think about that, you are stuck together for 12 hours or more with certain people several days in a row, or several days a week. In my case, I worked Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, so 3 days in a row. And if I picked up an extra day, I'm spending time with those people. So to know that that's how you bonded over that work, and you're no longer doing that work, it makes sense that they're no longer in your life. They were work friends. To me, that's totally different than having a friend that this other nurse friend that who I've stayed in contact with. It's like she was a true friend, and we had things in common, commonalities. Whereas the others who never stayed in touch with me, or I never contacted them because I was fired, so I was kind of trying to be real careful about communicating with them. There was a lawsuit for being wrongfully terminated, so I didn't want to create an issue by pulling people in and communicating during that time frame. But they never reached out to me as well, so I had to let that go and just know that when I was working there, these were surface friends. They were just there, friends in that location. And then when I ended up not working there anymore, I was left without them. So I've had to learn to make new friends. I know that sounds silly, but at this age, making new friends, it was very difficult. It is very difficult still. So I might have made a couple of new friends. When I was wrongfully terminated, I started a business, and I met friends that would come to see me as a nurse to purchase what services I had. And there are several that have remained somewhat long-term friends. You never know who's going to come into your life, but I believe, this is my thoughts only, I believe that people come into your life for a reason. So someone once told me a long time ago that something about he was in a new season. That season was over with. He was now in a new season. And I got to thinking about that, and I've heard that lots and lots of times. So I'm in a new season. Those friends that I had belong in that past season. They served a purpose. We got each other to where we were when I was taken out of that job, and we served our purpose, I believe. I feel like I'm getting of the mindset that I feel like I'm accepting that more. There was a reason why we were friends, and for whatever reason, it's done and it served a purpose. Don't know what it is, but that's just my thinking. And maybe I'm telling myself that to make it easier on me, to make it more palatable, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it. And I started looking at it years ago like that, right after I was fired. So the other thing is that when you make new friends at an older age, and for whatever reason, like for me, this friend that I had that I never heard from her, and she wouldn't respond back to my messages or my phone calls, that was for a season. That was whatever reason that was, whether it was for her to uplift me or for me to uplift her, that season is over with. And that was painful initially. But the more I think about it in this way, as that was a different season of my life, that makes it easier to accept, I guess. I also have a really good friend that I've had as a friend for, my goodness, for many, many years, probably I'd have to say 25 or 30 years. And I was the one constantly calling her to set up our play date, or whatever you want to call it, and getting together to eat. She lived about 30 minutes away, and whenever we'd talk about getting together, it was always her request for me to go there. She never came out here, maybe one time in several years of being friends. One time she came out to my house, and that was a long, long time ago, but that didn't happen anymore. And I was the one that was doing what she wanted to do. So if we'd get together, she'd say, well, why don't you come on over and we'll go such and such place. She chose where we ate. If I chose, she would have a better suggestion. And that was hard because it continued like that. I found that I was the one staying in contact with her. I was never hearing back from her. She would not initiate any phone calls after a while. She would not initiate wanting to get together for lunch. And I started kind of seeing the imbalance of that friendship. And that imbalance, when you see it, you kind of deny it, like you're thinking, oh, she's busy, or you don't. It's kind of like it smacks you in the face and you don't really notice it until one day you're like, well, wait a minute, I've been the one to constantly try to get a hold of her, and she's never once tried to contact me. So I got to where I pulled back, and I didn't communicate anymore. I started not calling, not checking on her, because it felt like a one-sided relationship. So we are still friends. I think we could pick up where we left off, but I think it would be the same way. I think it would continue down that same path. And she's married now. She did remarry, and we probably would not have any similar interests now, because she does things and spends a lot of time with her new husband. They're both retired, so they are out traveling. They do all kinds of things, and it's different when you're a solo person. And I just bumped my tripod if you saw a little jiggle. But when you're a single person, it's hard. When your single friends get married, you're kind of out of the picture almost. It's like, you're not a couple, so you can't get together with them because you're not a couple. It'd be odd. I don't think it would be odd, but in some cases it might be. It's you're like the third wheel. I don't want to be the third wheel. But when you have such a good friend like that, it doesn't feel like you're a third wheel. But I don't think we could get back to where we were initially. I feel like that's done. So my issue, I guess the reason for doing this video, is to talk about how it doesn't matter if we've lost those friends. It's painful. Yes, it's hurtful, but that's another season. We are stepping into a new season. So this semi-retirement that I'm in is a new season for me. The not working at my former employer when I was fired, I had a really hard time with that because it was wrong, and it was wrong, and we proved it. But that was a change, and I didn't want to accept that. It was hard to accept. But looking back, hindsight is always 20/20. But looking back, I see that season is over. That was a season that got me somewhere. For whatever reason, I was in that place or in that season for a reason. So that's kind of rhymey today, but I have to look at it like that. And I do honestly feel that the more that time goes by and I deal with situations like this, the more I see that there's a reason for it. That doesn't mean that everybody that's your friend now, or the things you're doing now, your social circle now, is going to disappear in the future. It might, but that doesn't mean that it will. So just let me know what you guys think. Have you had those cases or instances where you've lost friends for whatever reason, or you were the one initiating phone calls, lunch dates, and they weren't reciprocating? It felt like a one-sided friendship. So let me know if you had any of those issues. What you did, how did you deal with it? Were you hurt? Did it do something emotionally to you to where it hurt? Or were you just like forget about it, screw it. It is what it is. You know, I'm trying to look at it like that now, not the screw it part, but the it is what it is, because I really can't control it. I can't do anything about it. So it is what it is. You know, I can do the best I can to nourish the relationship, but I can't make it be a relationship or a friendship if the other person does not respect that or want that or reciprocate. So just let me know what you guys think, and I hope you get some tips or information from this video. And until the next one, I will see you next time.